No, you don't have to say those words again. Oh no, and you don't have to. No, you don't have to go and explain yourself, 'cause I ain't gonna listen. Yeah, all you wanted was a souvenir to remember it all. Yeah, you tore it apart down to every last piece. Yeah, a souvenir, another story to tell. And I gotta know how to find happiness in the wrong places. It never ends, it's there in all ways. It's evident you never change for our sake. Baby, I can't trust it. We're falling now. Your little black book ran out of pages. If you're gonna take it all, then baby, don't waste it. You only want it if you know you're gonna break it. Just another souvenir for the take, yeah. Just take it. Baby, just take it. No, you don't have to say those words again. Oh no, and you don't have to. No, you don't have to go and explain yourself, 'cause I ain't gonna listen. Yeah, all you wanted was a souvenir to remember the fall. To go and tell your friends you were there for it all. A souvenir, just a little postcard for the road. And I just gotta know how to find happiness in the wrong places. It never ends, it's there in all ways. It's evident you never change for our sake. Baby, I can't trust it. We're falling now. Your little black book ran out of pages. 'Cause if you're gonna take it all, then baby, don't waste it. You only want it if you know you're gonna break it. Just another souvenir for the take, yeah. Just take it. Baby, just take it. Just another souvenir for the road. That's the way it goes. Just take it. Baby, just take it.
Tries to hold on to the bottom. Here comes Gisette. They make contact. They touch once, twice, 3 times.
Foul trouble! Oh, no, Rocky into the wall. Big crash front straightaway. Huge crash coming into the tri-oval. No, Rocky up and into the air. They're beating and banging. Burn on the bottom. Cosman up top. Cosman, I think. No! Briar by 1/1000th of a second. Joseph, no! At the line, Thunhorse pulls the win out at the stripe. Oh, he saves it. What's going to happen here? Here comes the canvas. Get your foot in. He's got it. He's got it. Canvas is going to win.
Good evening, race fans, and welcome to FTF.GG's coverage of the 28th race of the 2022 Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series season. The Kick in the Tires 400K live from iRacing's virtual Kansas Speedway in Kansas City, Kansas. Jay Spike alongside Caleb Hoffman here as we are set to go gridding at Kansas Speedway. So we're going to jump right into it and tell you where your favorite drivers are starting. Michael Cozy Jr., your pole sitter with the fast time at 31.603 seconds, joined on the outside of the front row by Wyatt Tinsley. Matt Danson and Kevin McAdams make up row 2. Row 3 is Michael Frisch and Blake Reynolds, Josh Parker, Brandon Hawkins starting at 7th and 8th. 9th is Dylan Basin, and Matthew Zwack is 10th. The rest of these drivers are going to scroll through your screen and you will see where everyone else is starting tonight. It's the Kansas Speedway for 160 laps, stages at lap 45 and lap 90. End of stage 1 and stage 2 before we run it the rest of the way around this track that is 1.5 miles in length, 2.414 kilometers, 17 to 20 degrees of banking in the corners. It's progressive, so it gets higher as it goes up. Same on the front stretch where it's 9 degrees to the bottom, 11 degrees of banking on the top, 5 degrees of banking on the back stretch. Weather and time, it's July 1st, 2022 in Sim, 2:15 p.m. local time, 80 degrees Fahrenheit track temp or air temp, 130 degrees or 135 degrees track temp, winds to north at 3 miles an hour, no humidity, green flag here in the Kicking the Tires 400K race number 28 and race number 2 in the round of 16 in the Kicking the Tires playoffs for the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series is green, and Michael Cozy Jr. will lead this field down the back straightaway into turn 3 for the first time with Wyatt Tinsley and Matt Danson quickly in tow. Caleb.
And we see the field they're really starting to fan out through the corners here. That's going to be something we're probably going to see all day. Everybody trying to use anywhere they can on this racetrack. Lots of grip everywhere.
Brent Pancari just got punted into the fence coming out of turn 4. I didn't see who got into him, but heavy damage for his machine, and he is going to be stuck deep in the back of this. Looks like there was some help from David Cabrera as I check my replays. We'll see if we can get a look at that a little bit later, but Pancari quickly to the back of the field as Cozy leads, Danson second, Kevin McAdams in third, and the first battle on track about Dylan Basin, Josh Parker, Wyatt Tinsley, Malik Ray, Blake Reynolds, Brandon Hawkins, Alex Kolonix, everybody here fighting for spots in the top 10.
Yeah, and you see this first little pack single filing out and then back in the pack. Right now, still double file, 3x3, even farther on back. Still lots of great battling going on around the track here.
Tremendous amount of action here once you clear the top 3 who are beginning to scoot away. Parker working that high line to good effect to clear Malik Ray and go to 4th, and Ray will carry the momentum to get around Dylan Basin. So now it's on Blake Reynolds to try and make a move just at the back of this group as Parker is going to get a little bit of competition from Malik Ray.
And we see now starting to single file a little back, maybe settling in for a small little run here on board. Blake Reynolds.
Good look on board Blake Reynolds' machine. The complex SimWorks Ford Mustang currently in the 7th spot. You look off the back of Dylan Basin's machine and you get a good look of Reynolds, of Brandon Hawkins, Wyatt Tinsley, Logan Helton, Brian Mercurio, all in the mix. But they're all chasing Michael Cozy Jr., who's now jumped out to about a 0.4 of a second lead. It's a small gap, but a sizable one, as Dylan Dreiling having some issues a little bit further back in the field. Everybody now largely single file for the most part, save for Hawkins, who you see just a little bit further back in your screen. He was trying that middle lane in the groove, but they've all strung out, and it's single file until you get back to about 23rd, 24th, where Tyler Lennon and Ryan Araki are fighting for spots.
Well, yeah, and right now, we don't want to see kind of what we saw last week. A lot of these guys in Benton are just wanting to kind of get into this run, feel the cars out, get a feel for what tire wear is going to be like, which we saw in practice. There's a pretty steep fall off with them, so going to be interesting as we get later into the run here.
Tinsley, then Logan Helton, then Brian Mercurio and Alex Kolonix. This is 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. You see on your screens just ahead of that. Dylan Basin looking to the inside of Blake Reynolds for a spot. Malik Ray leading that group as they try and run down that pack of Danson, McAdams, and Parker and company that are up at the very front.
And really interesting to see Brandon Hawkins all the way up on the high side. Want to see how that treats his tires over this run, but also on the short run, if he's going to be able to get by this small little pack on the inside running up there by himself.
It's an interesting trade-off because you're going to burn a little bit more tire running up there by default. You're going to run a little bit longer around the racetrack, but it will allow you to keep up momentum. So it's one of those things where if you can maintain everything and keep your speed up there, you can make that outside lane work.
Absolutely. And again, it's all about this momentum with this next gen, feels like.
Also worth noting that your playoff drivers in this Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series of the round of 16 for 2022, you'll see those in yellow on the pylon to the left-hand side of your screen. And you'll see them cycle through the field and figure out where they are. No one locked themselves in last week. Michael Guest was our winner at Darlington Raceway 1 week ago, so it's still open season for everybody to try and lock into the round of 12, either on points or on a win. And you see the standings of the playoffs after Darlington there, where Brian Mercurio, Kevin King, Michael Frisch, all in really, really good shape. It's Cozy, Oates, Helton, and Zweck that had the work to do, but Cozy's at least doing his part for sure right now. He's led every lap now as we begin to work our way through the first 10 laps of this. We're kicking the tires 400K here at Kansas.
And absolutely a great run so far for Cozy. Absolutely what he needs after a really rough week at Darlington last week, and was involved in quite a few accidents. Was able to salvage something out of it, but definitely a better start this week than at Darlington.
I'd say that's a fair point across the board as you get a good look at the Logitech Altus G, or the Logitech G Altus Esports Chevy Camaro of Michael Cozy that is pacing this field, and how convenient that his teammate Matt Danson, carrying similar colors, runs in second. So Logitech G Altus 1-2 in this field as it stands, in Hawken there, the only one just on the edge of the screen, the only one within the top 10 really trying to figure out things on that high line.
And I mean, another thing sticking out to me as we pan back, you see once again Brandon Hawken just trying to rip that high side. But last week, you know, we actually saw it was a fair amount of non-playoff drivers up in the top 10. And then here we are this week. We got Michael Cozy Jr., Kevin McAdams, Blake Reynolds. Oh, car on the wall, maybe.
Trouble indeed. It's Tyler Stillwell who is down on pit road after smacking the wall on the right-hand side of his car, and I suspect it may have been a single car incident or something went wrong here. Not particularly obvious issues, but we're going to look at the replay and see what happened. And he got loose on the exit of turn 2, put it in the fence, and that caused enough damage to the right front that he couldn't really control it going off into 3. That's where the second wall smack came, is we've got another car off of the apron here. Devin Mistak down on pit road. I wonder if there's an issue with his Ford Mustang and whether or not there are any problems here, but I haven't seen anything yet to indicate that he's in trouble.
Yeah, interesting. We've already seen it's 2 or 3 cars slide on down to the pit road, only 13 laps through, so something to keep an eye on for sure.
So Mistak comes down pit road. Meanwhile, a little bit further up in the field, good battle. Looks like we've got a few drivers fighting for positions right around Malik Ray, Blake Reynolds, Brandon Hawken and company fighting for spots. And Hawken, remember, we talked about him using that highlight. He's the only one that's really tried to venture up top, and he's gotten around Malik Ray and may have gotten the fence there a little bit too as he tries to work to the outside of Blake Reynolds to get into the top 5.
Yeah, and right now the big thing I want to keep an eye on is Brandon Hawkins' tires. I mean, when is that fall off from what he's doing, you know, ripping the top every corner? When is that fall off going to hit him compared to these guys that have been, you know, a little more conservative, staying on the bottom, like you see at Blake Reynolds right now, right in front of him?
You can manage the slip angle and not try and overdrive it. You can make it work. I think a friend of FTF, Blake McCandless in particular, when he ran the Contender Series last year, he ran the high line just like Hawken did at a lot of tracks that were similar. Nashville and Homestead stand out to me in particular, and was able to gain some track position. And the key, I think, if you're going to run up there, is just making sure that you don't burn off that right front, because you are running a little bit more distance. If you don't force the wheel as much and just let the car roll out of the throttle, don't use the brake as much to burn off that right front and heat it up too much, you have the opportunity to make up some ground. You have to be smart about how you drive it, but it's not impossible to make that high line work. So we'll be watching to see where that crossover point is that you're talking about, Caleb, to find out whether or not Brandon Hawken is burning his tires off or whether or not he's doing a really nice job managing them and making that outside line work in a very effective way.
And still looking down here at turn 1, looks like Blake Reynolds going to opt to take Hawkins' line away from him here. Going through 2, looks like they'll get a little bit of a run, fall back in line off the corner, stay single file.
And Blake Reynolds outright just taking the air off the nose and taking away Brandon Hawkins' line, now almost stealing it for himself. Hawkins immediately responded by going to the middle. Blake runs the top, and that allows Malik Ray to go to the bottom and get alongside Hawkins to try and get that 6th position back.
Yeah, that's something that's so fun about this racetrack is you really can run about anywhere. And it's almost like a chess match watching these guys through the corner. You know, somebody's going to make a move. It's about how you respond to that move that really will make the difference here.
A lot of big movement a little bit further back in the field, but everybody crazy. And I think trouble maybe for David Cabrera we're hearing. See if we can get a look at Cabrera's machine, but all of a sudden I saw him. I saw him come down pit road is what he decided to do, and there's damage on the right-hand side of his machine. So we'll see if we can find out what happened to Cabrera. But in the meantime, Cozy's still clear of everyone save for Danson, who has joined up the front, and that's Altus Esports 1-2 still, but the gap that Cozy had is now down to 1/10 of a second compared to about the half a second that we were looking at some maybe 10-ish laps ago.
And starting to see slowly over this run, guys feel like they're starting to venture up a little closer to the wall just about every lap. Maybe guys getting more comfortable with their cars as they get settled into the run. I mean, you see especially out of Blake Reynolds, who was running the bottom and was, really comfortable staying down there, is now one of the guys that feels like he's on the front side of this, just challenging by going to the outside.
Let's take a look at the David Cabrera incident that we talked about just a few moments ago and see what happened to him. I saw a lot of motion towards the back of the field and coming off of 2. Same sort of issue there that we saw at Tyler Stillwell, where he just got loose off the corner. I think the bigger thing, you saw those 3 or 4 cars that took immediate evasive action to get down to the inside and not get in trouble as they swerved to avoid Cabrera as he got the fence. And more issues here for the 87 machine that went sideways and up into the wall. Clint Roberts in trouble as we continue. And the yellow flag is out, our first yellow of the evening.
Yeah, and that was Andy Margot that was involved in that as well. You see him limping down pit road with what should be sizable amount of damage after that contact.
Margot, the one who went sideways after he made contact with Clint Roberts, who came down off the fence. You'll see it all here on the FTF.GT replay. There's Roberts, who got sideways and got a little bit of help, got turned to the fence. Then Margot comes along and just runs out of space at the wrong time. So he gets clipped, goes across the racetrack, and it's enough for Justin Malillo to throw out the yellow flag from atop the race control stand and bring us under caution for the first time tonight.
Yeah, and you see Andy Margot collected there. Right there. That was the big contact that probably brought out this yellow. Yeah, not much you can really do there. Kind of committed to your line, and you'll go straight into the side of somebody like that.
That's Matt Spalding. That was the other car that was involved in that. Also an update for the Dylan Dreiling fans out there. And I quote, "My game locked up and crashed." So that would explain why Dreiling is down some 12 laps from our race leaders, as the leaders and just about everybody comes down pit road for shirtless Caleb Hoffman, and I would think 4 tires and fuel would be the order for just about everybody on pit road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 25 laps into this run, just about. I'd assume it'd be 4 tires and fuel.
It could be tricky, though, because Michael Cozy Jr. overshot his box just a bit, had to back up into his stall. So we'll see what kind of track position that costs him. The answer is at least the race lead and maybe a little bit more. I think he'll come out second, but Matt Danson with a better pit stop than his teammate at Altus Esports. So Matt Danson will come off of pit road as your leader, then Cozy, then Reynolds, then McAdams, then Spalding. It was pretty much as you were, but they came down pit road, save for that little shuffle, which underscores the importance of nailing entry and exit and everything down on pit lane.
Yeah, and they right here, they did call that on the 87, that last caution, which will be added to his rec score. Matt Spalding is the lucky dog as well, looks like, after that incident to bring out our first caution.
We'll take a quick break as the field resets and gets ready for the restart. You're watching coverage of the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series, kicking the tires 400K from the virtual Kansas Speedway on FTF.gg. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to FTF.GG's coverage of the Kick in the Tires 400K for the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series. James Pike, Caleb Kaufman, ready to bring you the action from the virtual Kansas Speedway. We'll get a restart on lap 26 of 167. It's an Altus Esports front row. Matt Danson, Michael Cozy Jr., 1 and 2 as we go back to green flag racing in the Windy City.
And watch out for Matt Danson here. He's going to slide in front of his teammate Michael Cozy Jr. Looking like we're going to get 3 wide on back. Getting dicey through the field right now off turn 2.
That was really, really close for Malik Ray, who almost got into Kevin McAdams and had to back it up just to save it. They managed to keep it together. Kane Cook was able to drive through the middle of a few cars and get around Dylan Basin and Brandon Hawken and company. So now he'll find himself on the edge of the top 5. Your top 2 are single file, then Reynolds, then Ray, then McAdams and Cook and Basin, and 3 wide there with Kevin King, Brandon Hawken, and Wyatt Tinsley in the middle of 1 and 2.
Brandon Hawken running the high line once again, paying off because he's already comfortable up there. Makes contact with Wyatt Tinsley down the backstretch. They keep it clean. That was once again another close call. These guys are dicey off this restart.
Lots of incidents here and lots of little movements where there's some give and some take that I don't think is going to be there if we find ourselves in a similar spot with, say, maybe 10 laps to go, 15 laps to go. I have a feeling some noses are going to be held and some people would be getting turned in those situations. But for now, everything's still in good order, although we'll have to watch and see whether or not drivers continue to get loose off the exit of turn 2. That was a theme that was prevalent in the opening 25 5 laps of this race. We'll see whether or not it carries over for the rest of this stage as we continue to watch the front 4 scoot away, and Kane Cook trying to hold off Dylan Basin, and everybody fighting for spots for the back. Brandon Hawkin now clear of Wyatt Tinsley, and the first side-by-side battle now Logan Helton and Tyler Gary.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more give and take right now than there will be here in about, say, 130 laps. But right now, I mean, still, Brian Mercurio right behind Matthew Zwack right now. Really interested to see, how he continues to grapple with his car right now. Obviously, not loving it as much as he probably wants to be.
Hawkin in pretty good shape here. Good battles, though, further back. Look at this pack here. You've got Hawkin running that high line. He's going up there immediately, just like he did in the opening stint of this race. He's going to try and drag Wyatt Tinsley with him. Meanwhile, that's Matthew Swack, I believe, going to the bottom into the inside of Kevin McAdams to try and get that final spot in the top 10, as they are door to door pretty consistently once you get from about here on back. But everybody in that top 5 all single file still.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, these guys on back are just a lot more willing to be making moves right now. I mean, you see once again guys like Brandon Hawkin on board right now with Kevin McAdams, just a lot more willing to stick their nose in places, just trying to make up any time they can at this point, where I feel like a lot of these guys in the top 5 are really just content sitting here because we're so early on in this run. Coming towards the end of the stage, though.
Yeah, about 10 laps to go, or 15-ish laps to go, I believe, in this first stage. As we look a little bit further back in the field and get a good look at Brian Mercurio, who's trying to fight Tyler Gary, who has stormed through this field. We've not said much about him, but Tyler Gary started almost dead last in this bunch. 40th on the grid. He's already up to 11th and now trying to work over Matthew Zwack for a spot in the top 10.
Once again, see these guys fan out just a little bit. As you see Tyler Gary right there, he's going to slide in behind Matthew Zwack. Almost not enough room for that, though. But he is going to be able to fall back in line, trying to get around. I believe it's Wyatt Tinsley on the inside.
Tinsley to the bottom indeed. Zwack working that high line, trying to drag Tyler Gary with him. McAdams is down low. Now he'll slide up to Brian Mercurio just behind this bunch, and a lot of movement there as Mercurio tries to throw the door in Philip McCandless's face as they continue to race for 12th. Meanwhile, Gary still in control of that 10th position, rather keeping Tinsley at bay and trying to get back to the rear bumper of Matthew Zwack, who himself is chasing Kevin King for the 8th spot, and then all of them trying to make up the gap to Dylan Basin, who's managed to jump out ahead of this group by about maybe 3 or 4 car lengths.
And through turns 1 and 2 there, Nathan Rabideau found a lot of time. He was not all the way up against the wall, but kind of in this lower middle groove and just shot past about 3 or 4 cars right there. I mean, he's still looking for his spot in line, but is a lot higher up in the chain than he was just a lap ago.
Nathan Rabideau trying to make his way up front. Rabideau with a good car, and also one of those that I think is starting to make a charge and starting to figure this out and starting to follow in the footsteps of Brandon Hawkin to make that high line work as we go on board just a little bit further back with Michael P. Frisch. Kevin McAdams is in that bunch too. McAdams has started to go the wrong way in this race. He rolled off from the 4th spot on the grid. He's back in the 13th position and continuing to fall as they fan out across the front straightaway behind him. But this is as low as he's been in this race so far, as some of the drivers who didn't qualify well have managed to make their way up towards the front.
And that's what I was going to comment on, that Kevin McAdams is just this is the lowest he's been all race, which, I mean, top 15 still respectable, but he's been on the downhill since this last restart.
As indeed, as they really have now strung out pretty nicely amongst this field. It's Rabideau and McCandless that are the ones searching for that high line grip, that speed, that room to make any sort of move and try and go up towards the front of this field. But how about Michael Frisch with the big block there on Rabideau to take the line away and also try and keep Logan Helton at bay too. Frisch now up to the 15th spot down the backstretch.
And I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic at Kansas these past few years. I mean, when you think about a 1.5-mile track like this, you know, your first thought really isn't, you know, that blocking type maneuver. But I mean, you saw it right there with Michael Frisch. I mean, just the way they can drive these cars into these corners, the different techniques that all these different drivers use is really just fascinating to watch.
First battle of the racetrack now belongs to Wyatt Tinsley and Brian Mercurio, with Kevin McAdams and Phil McCandless in tow there, along with Frisch and Logan Helton and Ramadou and Ryan Naraki now working the top line at the very back of this pack to try and gain a few spots.
And right now, Wyatt Tinsley going to fan right in front of Kevin McAdams there. Fall back in line, back off at turn number 4. Brian Mercurio here trying to stave off these guys from behind him. I mean, he's been getting kind of chipped off left and right. Wyatt Tinsley, now Kevin McAdams going to make his way around him. Ooh, side by side.
Yeah, 2 almost 3 wide there for a split second as Gary works to the outside of Wyatt Tinsley. Zwack is the next in line. We'll see if Gary decides to try and cut low, but thinks better of it. And we'll stay up on that high line to try and complete the pass on Tinsley and then set Zwack up over the next few laps.
Falling back into single file formation once again. I mean, a lot of these guys starting to get to that point in the run where we're just kind of content sitting. And as soon as I say that, Tyler Gary going to dip below Matthew Zwack there. That's going to be for the 9th position.
Gary wants this track position. He's immediately made the decision to charge to the front. Doesn't matter what happens with his tires. He's just going to go for it, try and get the space, and then get up there. Look, it's a move, though, from Kevin McAdams to force it underneath Wyatt Tinsley and make a hole for himself in the middle of 3 and 4. Tinsley will go way up the racetrack to try and defend the spot. McAdams will be alongside him, and they will be door-to-door, as will Zwack and Tyler Gary as they pass the lap machine there. I believe that is Art Reimer up on the top side.
Ooh, and big wiggle from Kevin McAdams there. He was underneath Wyatt Tinsley, and the car started to drift up once again. You see him just really tight on that corner panel once again, going to send it down in underneath Wyatt Tinsley. But that inside lane going to get stacked up from Tyler Gary now. Just almost like a clog going on right here with Tyler Gary, with all these guys behind him, like a hornet's nest. They're just trying to stick their noses anywhere they can for that clean air.
Also worth noting that Kane Cook got around Blake Reynolds for the 3rd spot a little bit further up the racetrack. And how about McAdams? We will go 3 wide in the middle of turn 2. And McAdams took advantage of Tinsley and Zwack. I think they made just the slightest bit of contact on entry to turn 1. And McAdams just rolled the momentum up.
The entire lap before, I mean, he was bobbing and weaving everywhere. And when he stuck it up there 3 wide, just absolutely in a different zip code. That number 26 on rails right now.
They continue to fight. Meanwhile, here's the battle for P2. Kane Cook continues to move towards the front. He's to the inside of Matt Danson for position as they continue to fight a little bit further back. We'll try and keep our eyes on both battles, but for the moment, Cook is going to sit in line. He was alongside Danson last time by, but maybe deciding to ride for just a little bit here and save the tires. It might give us the opportunity to go back to that hornet's nest for about the 10th spot on back.
And don't look now, but Blake Reynolds really starting to utilize that high side, trying to make up time on Kane Cook. We'll see it once again here in turns 3 and 4. Just that momentum, you're able to see how much he's carrying through the corner, and he's gaining on Kane Cook right now in that 013.
Meanwhile, Cozy comes across the stripe to take the white flag in the first stage, and we'll see who files in behind him and how the battle for P10 sorts out. It's pretty largely single file outside of Blake Reynolds and maybe Malik Ray, but we'll see how they fight as they come down the backstretch. There's Kane Cook looking to the inside of Matt Danson to try and get the runner-up spot in the stage. But it's Michael Cozy Jr. with all sorts of daylight in front of him that will roll out at turn 4 with a few car lengths to spare, who will claim stage number 1 in the kick in the tires at 400K. We'll wait for the rest of the field to cross the line, but there's stage 1 all done and dusted for you.
Yeah, and we'll get the results here. But a good win for Michael Cozy Jr. Good for him to accrue some of those playoff points to carry into next round. Once again, a reminder that those regular season points that all these guys have accrued won't be following them into the round of 12.
So there's stage 1 done, Dustin. We'll go to lap 90. That'll be stage number 2. Meanwhile, look at this battle for second. Kane Cook to the inside of Matt Danson, and he'd been working on that move for about 3 or 4 laps, and finally just decided he was going to slide it right up in front and make the stop. As goal, there's contact there, and Danson gets loose. There was a chain reaction there, an accordion effect, as I think Malik Ray might have gotten a little bit of Matt Danson, but they all checked up. Danson goes sideways, and he saves it, but not before he loses about 6 spots on the racetrack.
Absolutely incredible that we didn't see a caution right there. And yeah, that was just a result of Matt Danson and Malik Ray making contact. No one really at fault there. It's just when you get 5 cars under a blanket like that, especially at a track here like Kansas, there's bound to be some contact eventually, and we saw it right there.
Yeah, they Kane Cook threw the block there on Danson, and Ray didn't have enough time to check up on his own, and so Ray got into the back of Danson and sent him down. We'll see the replay here coming out of 2. Here comes Cook, who comes down the racetrack, but there's the block on Danson and the contact from Ray, who didn't have enough time to react, and that's why Danson went sideways and slid a little bit down the back straightaway. But they carry on. We stay green flag racing, and now Kane Cook is in second, and it's Blake Reynolds and Kevin King who are left to try and fight for that 3rd spot. King down low, Reynolds on the high line.
Still side by side here. That's Blake Reynolds, Kevin King. Reynolds going to use that momentum he got off turn number 2 to get underneath. Now Kevin King side by side. Just a really fun battle between these two.
Indeed, a really, really entertaining battle as they continue to roll. Everybody is going to fire up and continue to work their way here. Cook now trying to fight the inside there. A lap traffic who just got in the fence and got a good piece of it. That was Dylan Dryling, who had the connection issues we talked about earlier. So a night to forget already for him. But they've stretched it out and they've caught lap traffic as well. But King will work again to the inside of Blake Reynolds to try and follow in the footsteps of Kane Cook and get the 3rd spot.
Yeah, and watching Blake Reynolds and Kevin King in this battle right now, if you're one of those guys like a Malik Ray or Dylan Basin, you know, how aggressive are you going to be to try to get back up into the middle of this battle? Because they're scrubbing off speed battling right now. And if you're Malik Ray or Dylan Basin right now, you're just trying to hot lap it to get to the back of them.
Dylan Basin, Malik Ray continuing to push for a spot in the top 5. Ray has it. Basin wants it. Matt Danson now is in the clutches of that battle that we saw with Wyatt Tinsley, with Kevin McAdams, with Brian Mercurio, with Brandon Halkin, with Tyler Gary. All of those drivers fighting for spots here at the virtual Kansas Speedway.
And interesting to see Matt Danson here a little deeper in the pack, of course, the result of that contact that we saw a few laps ago, but now he's got Wyatt Tinsley all over the back of him. Just interesting to see how the car reacts a little differently, although he does have the cleanest air out of about anybody in this little pack from about 7th on back.
That they stalled out that battle between Kevin King and Blake Reynolds, so our attention gets to run right back here to P7, P8, P9, P10. These are the folks that you see on your screen at the moment. Tinsley to the inside, Danson to the outside, and Mercurio is going to follow suit and then go up high and run the main racing line. So he's just going to try and attach himself to the back of this fight and make it a 3-car battle, as is Kevin McAdams, who's trying to drop Tyler Gary and leave him in a battle with Michael Frisch and Logan Helton for 11th, 12th, and 13th.
Wyatt Tinsley, another one of those playoff drivers who's going to be in need of a rebound here at Kansas. If you remember that contact out of turn number 4 that took him out from P2. Was running strong last week, running strong again this week. Just has to hold on to it. P7 right now for Wyatt Tinsley, and he's got a few playoff drivers behind him in Mercurio and McAdams.
Danson now almost in danger, I think, of getting stuck on that high line if he's not careful. There goes McAdams to the inside to complete the pass and gain the spot. He's up to 9th. Now here comes Tyler Gary to the inside, as you see Matthew Zwack making a big move down to the bottom to try and get around Philip McCandless, but not quite yet. So our eyes return to this battle here between Gary and Danson for the final spot in the top 10, which Danson will lose out on, Gary will take, and now it's Michael Frisch to try and get 11th.
Logan Helton right now trying to figure out any way he can around Matt Danson. You see he's going to peek 3 wide just a little bit. Not sure if there's really room for that move to be made. Contact's made, and that's Phil McCandless around, I believe, on the backstretch.
Around and into the fence he goes, down on the apron of the racetrack, but he's out of the racing groove, so I believe will stay green. But a tough break for Philip McCandless, whose right side is well torn up, in a lot of trouble. He spins it around again and loops it, struggling now to get that back to pit road.
Yeah, and you see he's going to take a tow, and that's just a result of aggressive driving right there. I mean, Logan Helton was just trying any way he could to get around and made it 3 wide when maybe there wasn't enough room there. And you see Philip McCandless is going to get the short end of it. Just a rough night.
McCandless pulls out, yeah, just a tough break there because Helton was trying to go to the inside. He was trying to set up a pass on Matt Danson as McCandless was just trying to come off the line, and they both sort of drove into each other and were working from the same spot. And Philip McCandless ends up on the short end of that stick and is already out of the race. He's pulled behind the wall into the garage. Is likely done for the evening. So that leaves us with Michael Cozy Jr. and Kane Cook. Actually, no, Spencer Ray now in trouble. Another driver with a lot of right side damage as Ray crawls through 1 and 2 on the apron.
Yeah, and interesting to see what happened to Spencer Ray here. Once again, I mean, just so many incidents on track. Kind of surprised we haven't seen a yellow thrown so far, but great job to keep him green and keep him racing right now and get deeper into this run.
This is the group here with Malik Ray, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all in this pack, as Kane Cook is now stalking our race leader Michael Cozy Jr. 3 wide, though, just a bit further back, as Kevin King will cede the spot, and Malik Ray will try and make moves here and make things happen. That's Chris Wetz, who blitzed past all of them, but Wetz has fresh tires and is not on the lead lap. So that's why you saw such a difference in speed, and it's something these drivers are going to have to be mindful of. The lap traffic that's already come down and gotten fresh tires will be significantly quicker lap on lap than our leaders, so the leaders just have to make sure they don't get run over.
Blake Reynolds.
It was close there too, Caleb.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he is absolutely manhandling that car right now. Just lots of counter steer. Almost feels like a dirt track when you look on the onboard camera. I mean, he is just absolutely wheeling that thing through the high side. Contact now made with the wall, wiggling all over the place. Tires absolutely killed on that number 66.
Makes me wonder when we might see him come down pit road. It's been about 40 laps since they pit for tires as Kane Cook completes the pass on Michael Cozy Jr. and gives us our first proper lead change of the night here on lap 60 of 167. Kane Cook, the Missouri native, this effectively is his home track. So, you know, he's motivated to try and do well here at Kansas.
Absolutely, but Michael Cozy Jr. has a championship on his mind, and wow, Blake Reynolds still almost losing it out of the corner. Just, I'm not even sure if that's tires or just maybe something broken on the car. I mean, he's wiggling everywhere right now.
It almost feels like it's a little bit more than just the tires. We know that Blake Reynolds is aggressive with the right front as he is sideways, just trying to save it left, right, center. Here comes Wyatt Tinsley now working his way to the inside of Reynolds' machine, who almost lost it in front of everybody. And now here comes Mercurio to the high line. Tinsley tried to go up there as Reynolds is just hanging on to it. I almost feel like he's just doing this for fun. I can't tell, but I think going to the grass is going to cost a few spots for Blake Reynolds. He'll give up the track position, and Tinsley and Mercurio and Tyler Gary will all move up.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe that's a big part of it here, because he is still just all over the place.
Is he having fun? Or is he going to lose it? See, here's the thing is that Blake Reynolds has got such good car control. We've seen it throughout the years here in FTF and in competition across the service that if he were having fun and just outright drifting it, I would not be surprised. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he's burned off the right rear, because traditionally that's been the tricky tire for him. He's the kind of driver that burns up the right rear faster than some of the other drivers around him and in this field. So it wouldn't shock me if he was suffering from a set of Warren Goodyear Eagles.
Yeah, not sure, but either way, he has lost about 15 spots right now to whatever might be ailing that 66, just all over the place. Continues to just get picked off one by one.
So we'll let Blake sort out his own issues, and we'll turn our attention back towards the front and back to the battle here for 6th, 7th, and 8th, where they are 3 wide in the middle of 1 and 2. That's Gary up top, Tinsley in the middle, and Mercurio down on the inside to try and figure out who wants this 6th position.
And right now, I've got my eyes still looking back to the pack. Brandon Hawken is in a similar predicament now where the car is just sideways just about everywhere. Tyler Lannon actually hit the wall right in front of him. And we have multiple cars that are just sideways throughout the corners now.
And multiple leaders that are down on pit road for the first time. Wyatt Tinsley, Logan Helton, and Michael Cozy Jr. all in after about a 40-plus lap run here on lap 65 of 167. So Cozy, the highest running of these drivers, but all 3 of them had been running in the top 10, and they decide to come in for service. Cozy this time not going to miss his entry into his pit box. And now here comes Kane Cook and Malik Ray down in for service. Kevin King is in on pit road, as is, I believe, Brian Mercurio and Michael P. Frisch. Kevin McAdams comes in. Nathan Rabideau, Matt Danson in for service. Jonathan Oates and Matt Spalding, Tyler Lannon, Ryan Pantasillo, Evan Rice. Pretty much everybody, Caleb Hoffman, now in for service.
Yeah, and looking through right now, mostly everyone, looks like everyone's going to get in and out pretty cleanly. Now that group that Kevin McAdams led onto pit roads just now entering their box for service.
Tyler Gary, Tyler Gary, Matthew Zwack, Alex Kolinix, and Nate Stewart will assume the race lead, and he is the last of the drivers yet to pit alongside. You could count Jay Poulin, but Poulin came in a little bit earlier, so he's off on a different strategy, sort of on that B-ish alternate strategy, which is shared by Chris Wetz and Art Reimer and a few others towards the back. So Stewart all on his own, and Dylan Basin on pit road with Thwack and Kolonix. Tyler Gary coming off of pit road as it stands. Cosman also in the mix too. We'll see where everyone cycles around as Nate Stewart now comes down pit road. We'll try and figure out who our leader is going to be, and I think the answer to that question once they cycle around is Michael Cozy Jr., who had a fantastic pit stop this time around and dropped Kane Cook by the tune of about 1.5 seconds. He gained a significant amount of time through his pit stop.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between a clean pit stop and not. And I mean, getting on pit road, it felt like everybody was pretty equal. So maybe that's just a difference in entry for Michael Cozy Jr. I mean, he might have that optimized. It seems like it, as you said, about 1.5 seconds advantage he now has on the 013 machine.
You look at this, yeah, that's, I'd say that's almost, and what's amazing is that it lines up almost perfectly. It was a 13.9 to a 14.3 in the box for Cozy compared to Cook, and it was a 40.5 to a 41.5 on pit lane time for those shoes. So you take the difference, it was a full second on the lane, and it was almost 0.5 seconds in the box, add another 1/10, and there's your 1.5 seconds. So yeah, pretty much entirely.
And I mean, that stresses the importance of green flag pit stops for you right there. And now another big thing to watch is these guys, for the first time or not, you know, they're in a run on these fresh tires. So going to be interesting to see who can kind of work their way up. My eye right now on Malik Ray, who's slowly reeling in Kane Cook, who was able to take advantage of Michael Cozy slipping back on the long run. But here on the short run, looks like his lunch is about to get eaten by Malik Ray.
All eyes on this. This would be the battle for third between Ray and Cook, two drivers who have been around the sim for a long time. Seasoned veterans, drivers who have both competed in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series at one point. Cook, a former veteran of the series. Ray, currently one of the 40 involved in the 2022 campaign, as he will try to work the rear bumper of Kane Cook over, find some space, and maybe make this move for P3 as early as turns 1 and 2 as we enter lap 71 of 167.
Yeah, and really a big difference in how they're entering corners. I mean, Malik Ray's not afraid to get that car right on that white line and let it drift up off the corner, not really scrubbing off too much speed. Once again, you see Malik Ray's going to get right down on the bottom, let the car drift back up off exit, closing in on Kane Cook. who's keeping the car trying in that lower middle lane area. And now he's slidden up right behind him, really backing up these corners. Malik Ray.
Also, just keeping an eye on the playoff drivers and where they're running. You see some drivers who are struggling now. You see Rabideau, Oates, Hawken between 15th and 20th. And then look at all the yellow amongst the names from 21st to 25th. Naraki, Reynolds, Stewart, Cosman's there. And Chris Wetz, who I believe is the lowest running playoff driver as it stands. And he will want to try and find some sort of speed, especially when we consider that Wetz is the last man in to the round of 12 as they entered this race coming out of Darlington, which would immediately change if it finished now, because Michael Cozy Jr. would have the win, would lock himself into the round of 12, and Wetz would then become the first driver on the outside looking in. So work to do, I think, for Chris Wetz as we approach the halfway point of the Kick in the Tires 400K at Kansas.
And absolutely, and that's one of the most difficult parts, I'd say, about being a playoff driver, is just staying on top of where are all my playoff competitors running. Obviously, right now with Michael Cozy Jr. in the lead, he would have that win and transfer spot, whereas a few laps ago that wasn't the case because Jake Poulin was out ahead of him. So just staying on top of that, such a challenge on top of everything else that comes with racing here at Kansas.
Here's your train a little bit further back. I think this is about the ballpark of maybe Brandon Hawken, I think. Yes, it is. It's Hawken, Naraki, Reynolds, Spalding, Stewart, all drivers that could stand to have good runs, to gain a few playoff points, to leave themselves in a little bit better position when we go to Bristol to try and sort themselves out, make it a little bit easier to gain a spot in the round of 12.
Absolutely. And again, with eyes back here on this mini pack of sorts that is formed coming out of turn 2 right now. Whoa, big block from Ryan Naraki on Blake Reynolds. Actually going to see a little bump draft action down the backstretch out of Blake Reynolds. And now that's going to, his momentum's going to carry him up. Nate Stewart now to the inside of Ryan Naraki. Just like a card deck being shuffled with how many spots are just being gained and lost right here.
That was really beautiful work there from Nate Stewart, who just kept that thing pinned to the bottom in the Apex Action Photography Chevy Camaro, rode the white line to get around some of his competition. Now he's going to try and work over Brandon Hawken. This would be for the 19th spot. If he can find a way to complete the passage at the inside, he will look as they enter turn 3.
And Ryan Naraki and Blake Reynolds once again made contact on the backstretch there. Ryan Naraki going to get the short end of that stick. Now Blake Reynolds going to work his way to the inside of Brandon Hawken. Both these cars on that run were really out of control, so fun to see them now with some fresh tires. Blake Reynolds cutting the nose off of Brandon Hawken right there. No mercy on entry there from Blake Reynolds.
None whatsoever, as Reynolds will now control the final spot in the top 20 and continue to work. And as he does that, we'll keep an eye on the pack a little bit further up the field. That starts with Brian Mercurio and covers just about everybody else at the back end of the top 10. It stretches just about all the way to Josh Parker.
Looking up a little further, eyes now on Dylan Basin, who's going to be to the outside of Wyatt Tinsley. Starting to pick off cars one by one. Another one of these guys that is now going to be testing his fate on the high side. Now going to be trying to work on Michael P. Frisch. Big wiggle off the exit. That's going to put him down on the inside, and he's actually going to carry that momentum all the way down to the side, the door of Michael P. Frisch, side by side going into 1 and 2.
It was a really nice job there from Dylan Basin to just sort of use what you were given and make it work some way, somehow, and make it work. He did. He clears Frisch. He gets the 7th spot. He tried to bring his teammate Wyatt Tinsley with him, but just didn't quite have the momentum to make that happen.
And now Basin looks like he's going to put a little bit of a gap to the nose of Michael P. Frisch. Frisch trying to maintain momentum off exit of the corner. Not going to be enough to really make a move here, so they'll still stay in the single file formation on lap 80.
Very quickly approaching the halfway point. We're going to be there in 4 laps, so not too much time to work and not too much time left to work in the stage either. We're 10 laps to go now in the second stage, so there are going to be points upcoming for some of these drivers as they continue to navigate the Kansas Speedway. But it's that group there from about, call it 6th on back. That's really where some of the best battles are on track. Maybe a little bit further back. We could slide back, actually. Let's take a look here at Chris Wetz, who is hard in the fence and slow in the middle of turns 1 and 2. This could be problematic. He's trying to get down to the inside, but there's so many cars moving at speed behind him. I don't know if he's going to have the opportunity to do it in the corner. So he's going to keep it pinned up on the fence, and now he'll get to the apron and be able to bring his car to pit road. But that's big trouble for the driver who was right on the edge of the cut line for the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, Chris Wetz right now with a lot of damage to the right side of that race car. Going to be interesting to see what happened. We'll try to take a look at that here the next few laps, but big playoff implications right now for Chris Wetz, especially with Michael Cozy Jr. in the lead. Here's a replay. Relatively normal so far. See Spencer Ray behind him.
Indeed, and then he got loose off the corner. Yeah, and it happened too to a few other drivers, but we've seen that loose on corner exit has been a theme here at Kansas. Drivers just losing control of the rear end, trying to overcorrect and then putting themselves in the fence, and that's the last thing that Chris Wetz needed. He did not need to go through that when he's already fighting to try and hang on to whatever playoff points he has.
And he actually overshot his box as well, so a bad situation going to get worse. He's going to take 4 tires and repair some of that heavy right side damage he accrued there. A tough spot here at Kansas, especially when you're looking at the playoff cutoff next week at Bristol, which is a notoriously grueling racetrack as well.
A tough place to go race is that Bristol Motor Speedway. As you get a good look here at Malik Ray and Michael Cozy Jr. These two fighting for 2nd and 3rd as Kane Cook is just out ahead of them. He's sort of maintaining the gap here and sort of working on making sure he gets up front and stays there and hangs out and doesn't burn off himself too much.
Yeah, and I mean, looking back at a lot of these race cars that were up in the top 10, top 5 earlier that are now struggling to be in the top 20, just courtesy of that last round of green flag pit stops, namely Blake Reynolds, Brendan Hawken. Their lap times right now are somewhat struggling. Kane Cook right now just did a 33.4, and looking at Blake Reynolds on back, you know, they're about 3 or 4 tenths off that. So really interesting to see kind of the dynamic of these guys that are deeper into the pack versus the guys up front with clean air.
And now it changes things, though. Everyone's so spread out now that there's not really that same dirty air effect that we had, especially at the beginning of this race or on restarts. You're largely in your own sort of bubble at this point, so you just have to mind things here. So we get another good look at the battle with Brian Mercurio trying to fight for a spot and take it away from Dylan Basin. Tyler Gary is in the mix too, as are Michael P. Frisch and Wyatt Tinsley just off the back of this group, and this is all from 5th to about the 10th position.
And another thing to keep in mind here, closely coming into the end of stage number 2 here with Kane Cook out front. Might see something from Michael Cozy Jr., Kevin King, maybe trying to make a run for extra points here at stage end, especially from Michael Cozy Jr. He is in striking distance of Malik Ray, just trying to reel him in as we get to about going to be 4 laps to go instead of the stage.
4 laps to go in the 2nd stage. Kane Cook in control of things as it stands. We'll see if Malik Ray or Michael Cozy Jr. would want to get up there. Cozy in particular, I don't think would mind the playoff points that would come from finishing a few spots higher in the stage. But Cook and Ray are not playoff drivers. They're taking away points at the end of the stage from folks who may need that in their quest for championship. How that affects things going forward, we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's the same thing that we saw with Michael Guest at Darlington last week, taking one of those wins, one of those transfer spots from, it was Brian Mercurio who finished right behind him in P2. So, you know, Michael Cozy Jr. chopping at the bit, trying to make sure that doesn't happen again here at Kansas. Trying to reel him in, but not to any avail at the moment, I don't believe.
At the moment as it stands, as Malik Ray is starting to chip into that lead of Kane Cook just a little bit, but it's not anything particularly significant as Cook will cross the stripe to take the white flag in stage number 2.
Yeah, and you see Malik Ray once again right on that white line. Going to make up just a little bit of time down the backstretch. I don't think, however, it's going to be enough for Malik Ray in this 700 machine.
Won't be enough indeed as Kane Cook comes off the corner, and Kane Cook will take the second stage of the Kick in the Tires 400K for the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series at iRacing's virtual Kansas Speedway. But a lot of important points for some playoff drivers in the mix there. You'll see the stage results come up on the top of your screen here in just a few moments. There's Cook, Michael Cozy Jr., Kevin King, Brian Mercurio, Michael Frisch, Wyatt Tinsley, and Logan Helton, all gaining stage points in their quest to advance into the round of 12 of the playoffs. We'll take a quick break here on FTF.GG and then be back with more coverage of the Kick in the Tires 400K for the Barr Visuals FTM Cup Series for the virtual Kansas Speedway. Welcome back to FTF.GG's coverage of the Kick in the Tires 400K for the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series race number 28 of the season, at the second race of the round of 16 in the playoffs. James Pike here alongside Caleb Hoffman as we are now in the final stage, approaching 70 laps to go here as Kane Cook, Malik Ray, Michael Cozy and company all trying to work their way around, clear the lap traffic and distance themselves from the rest of this field. We're starting to see gaps appear though amongst the top 10, and we're starting to see some of the battles slow down, and we're starting to see some drivers come down pit road as Scotty Smith spins out of turn 4 and will just come down and use the opportunity to pit. But we should see drivers in for service probably at about the next 10 to 15 laps or so, Caleb.
Yeah, and that was a pretty scary few seconds there for Scotty Smith. He spun it right in front of our leaders, Kane Cook and Malik Ray, who had to check up to not be collected in any collateral that may have brought. But good job by Scotty Smith to just bring it down on pit road, and good job by these leaders to keep it all out of trouble. But yeah, expecting pit stops to start about any time here, checking for any cars to be majorly out of control like we kind of saw at the end of last run.
Little bit of sideways wiggle there for Matthew Zwack coming out of turn 4. I saw him working the wheel just a bit to try and get underneath Alex Kolinix, but not quite enough to make it work. We'll see whether or not it's the same sort of story. And yeah, just a hair of movement there for Matthew Zwack to try and keep himself alongside Kolinix and give himself a chance to try and fight for position.
And starting to see some of those subtle wiggles are becoming not so subtle at this point. Just looking back through the field, I mean, as you mentioned with Matthew Zwack, we see Logan Helton now dip onto the pit lane. Gonna start seeing a lot more of this field peel off the racetrack, go on for, I assume 4 tires and fuel.
You would think here, you would think these drivers likely, I think, going to have to make one more stop if they're going to be able to make it so far as tires are concerned. So you figure they may end up splitting it here from the end, which gives you a run of about 36 laps or so to try and go before you come down for what should be your last stop for tires.
And still, most of these guys contentious, sitting out here. Kevin King almost just lost it off turn 2. He's going to lose a few spots. Looks like Wyatt Tinsley's going to make his way around him. But another thing to just keep your eye on is the difference between pit road entry and, you know, getting your service. We saw it last time with Michael Cozy Jr. netted him about a 1.5-second lead. So interested to see how these spots shuffle off pit road. Not even with any kind of accidents or anything like that, just purely in how optimized you can make your sequence.
Meanwhile, look at the, well, there's Michael P. Frisch, who we hear may or may not have spent on pit road. We'll see if we can figure out where he lands in the midst of all of this. But you also caught right before we took a look at Michael P. Frisch's machine that Malik Ray has run down Kane Cook for the race lead, and we may have a battle for P1 on our hands over the next few laps.
Yeah, and a really interesting time in this run for Malik Ray to catch up to Kane Cook as we are approaching these green flag pit stops. It's going to be interesting to see if Malik Ray can try to get around Kane Cook, because that difference is going to be massive. Really exacerbated. You'll see it as they come off pit road whenever they do decide to come down.
You see Cook and Ray. You're also going to see Wyatt Tinsley coming to the frame. You see that red car up at the top of your screen. Tinsley has already come down for service. He pitted about 10 laps ago, so he's currently scored in 20th. Tinsley's going to work his way around these leaders and get his lap back. So he's not racing for position, although he's had a good car tonight, but is just racing to try and get back on the lead lap here and not have to worry about the lucky dog, which saves him just in case we do get it.
And you can really see the difference there between these old tires, worn tires, and the new tires that Wyatt Tinsley had. He was able to just slice and dice his way around Kane Cook and Malik Ray like it was nothing. You know, maybe that plants the thought as you see now Michael Cozy Jr. going to be coming down the pit road for tires and fuel. Just, you know, when do these two leaders start to feel that urge? Hey, I need to come to pit road.
But you've got the track position, and I think likewise you don't have the impetus to come down unless you feel like you absolutely have to, as Cozy will come down for service once again. Is he going to hit his box properly this time? Yes. It was an issue on that initial pit stop in the yellow that cost him the race lead and handed it over to Matt Danson. But since then, Danson's nearly gotten himself into trouble, and Cozy's been able to keep himself relatively clean, and now Cozy trying to be the first car out amongst those who have already come in for service, although Tinsley may well end up leapfrogging everybody here, albeit with the older tires, depending on how this pans out. We're looking for our next pit stops here. Those who you think would come in next, probably those towards the back of the group that haven't come in, which puts us right around 12th, 13th, 14th. Keep an eye on Blake Reynolds, Matt Spalding, Evan Rice and company. They may be the next ones to come in for service.
And I mean, it's absolutely just a battle of give and take. It's really just, as a driver, you deciding when you want to peak in this run compared to everybody else. I mean, Wyatt Tinsley right now absolutely flying around all these leaders. He got his lap back, and he's probably going to inherit the lead on this pit cycle. It's just, when do those tires start to fall off, and how does that affect you as we get closer to our next cycle? You know, do you play your cards right with 62 laps to go, where you're only going to have to make one stop and you're still going to be relatively fast at the end? That's just the give and take that you have to play through your head. Is right now our leaders, Kane Cook and Malik Ray, going to dip down onto the pit lane. Both of them lock up the tires.
Ooh, Kane Cook came in very hot down on pit road. I'll be curious to see if he ends up getting hit with any sort of penalty, but that was close from the Missouri native. He definitely was moving when he pulled off of the banking down onto pit lane. But tires up on that 013 machine. Now he'll flip around to the other side and get more tires and wait to see whether or not there's any sort of penalty. Nope. all good for Kane Cook. He was able to get off as soon as the 4 tires came back down on the ground. The question now is whether or not he's going to end up with the lead off of pit road over Malik Ray, and only just, but it's just enough to make it work. Here comes Dylan Basin in for service. Brian Mercurio in as well, as is Matthew Zwack. Matt Spalding is going to make his way down pit road, and Wyatt Tinsley then will be the one to try and jump ahead of all of them. And Tinsley may well just, again, albeit on old tires, but he may have played this well enough to where he may, at least for a little bit, go out and lead a few laps.
Yeah, and right now, that was a very interesting sequence there from Kane Cook and Malik Ray, who are now interlocked in a hard fight for, I believe this will come out to be position number 12 on this lap, position number 11. But I mean, Kane Cook, it felt like he was almost mirror driving there to see when Malik Ray would make his decision to come on pit road, and just decided to make his decision whenever Malik Ray inevitably dipped down.
Nate Stewart and Tyler Gary have come down pit road, and that means that Wyatt Tinsley will indeed assume the race lead. However, he's got the oldest tires amongst any one of the leaders. He short pitted all of them by anywhere from 10 to 15 laps or so. So he's going to be giving up lap time compared to everyone else. And as these drivers cycle through their stops, I think we'll get a better sense of just how much time he's going to bleed. Right now, it's a 4.3 second lead that he's got on Michael P. Frisch. However, Frisch was faster by 1.1 seconds that last time by. We'll take a look at the margins as they come back across the stripe and see where they sit. Last lap for Tinsley, a 33.308 to Frisch's 32.4, so still in the ballpark of about a second, and the lead is now down to about 3.5 seconds. So Tinsley is your leader, but it might not be for long.
And I think the race-defining question right now for Wyatt Tinsley is whether or not the rest of this race is going to go caution-free. I mean, right now, if you're all Wyatt Tinsley, you're going to be gushing lap times here in the next few laps. It's just, you know, you're hoping that an accident somewhere happens that's going to warrant a caution. That way you can kind of remain on cycle with all these other guys who might take that opportunity to try to pit as well, albeit it's they're still on relatively fresh tires. It's just, you know, if you're Wyatt Tinsley here in about 15 laps, you know, there's a big difference between a caution hitting you when you're out front and when you're probably going to be looking somewhere in the late teens, if not early 20s. So just a matter of if that caution hits, and if it does, when is that going to happen for Wyatt Tinsley?
Michael Cozy Jr. in the mix here. Tinsley, in theory, I think came in close enough to where no, he'll still probably have to pit no matter what. So he may end up short pitting, I think, everybody here as well, which may end up working in his favor. That'll be the curious thing. If you're Tinsley and you think this is going green the rest of the way, I think you probably have to be aggressive and pit before everyone else to maximize the strategy. If you wait too long, then you end up bleeding too much track position, bleeding too much time, and it ends up neutering the effectiveness of trying to short pit everyone in the first place. But as it stands, if he short pits everybody again and pitch close enough to the end to where he can make it, it might just pay some dividends for Wyatt Tinsley.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you see right now, Michael Cozy Jr. is on the hunt again on fresher tires. He's now going to dip to the inside and take the lead from Wyatt Tinsley. So now Wyatt Tinsley has a good relative litmus test to see about when that tire fall off is going to hit him relative to the rest of his fellow leaders. So now, you know, you got to kind of crunch those numbers on the go, figure out what that sweet spot is to make it last, to see if you can walk out of here potentially with a dub and punch your ticket to the next round of the playoffs.
It's a 32.5 from Cozy to a 33.8 rather from Tinsley. So lap time difference of about 1.3 seconds between your two leaders. And here comes Michael Frisch, who ran a 32.9 that last time by and is beginning to gain on Tinsley to take away the second spot.
And you see, just still trying to reel Wyatt Tinsley in. Not going to be too much of a challenge for Michael P. Frisch once again on those fresher tires. And I mean, with the bubble that these green flag pit stops have created, I mean, Wyatt Tinsley does still have a fair amount of breathing room to Logan Helton behind him. I mean, it'll be a lap or two, but that lap or two can make a big difference here in come the race finish.
Right. Every lap in that sense could matter a significant amount. But I think it's intriguing how a lot of your front runners were ones who short-pitted the leaders just a bit. We're looking at Kane Cook. Kane Cook is back of all this by about 4 seconds. He just cleared Logan Helton to get to the 4th spot, but he's still got that 4-second gap to make up to get to Michael Cozy Jr. and take away the race lead. Question is going to be, when does he get up there? And how long does it take him to get to Cozy and fight for P1?
And once again, it's just a matter of kind of crunching some numbers in your head and just trying to figure out when that sweet spot is, and keeping that number in your head come this final round of green flag pit stops that'll hit us here, barring any shenanigans, whether it be a caution or an accident, something of that sort.
If we have some shenanigans, would we call that a Barr visual? Barr the unexpected, right?
Yeah, that's some good wordplay there from you, Pike.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and see myself out on this one as we get a good look here at Kane Cook. This is the battle for second to clear Michael P. Frisch. Cook does that with ease. The gap to the leaders now 2.6 seconds. We'll look at lap times here once again as they came across the stripe. It was a 33.2 for Cozy. It was a 32.4 for Kane Cook. 0.8 of a second he lopped off that last time by. So Cook clearly is faster. Probably will catch Cozy, and we'll have a fight for the race lead within the next 2 to 3 laps or so.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're Michael Cozy Jr. right now, you're going to want to stay on this cycle similar to Wyatt Tinsley when it comes to your last round of pit stops. Kane Cook right now, just, it's got to be intimidating, just, probably looking in your intervals box and just watching that number slowly creep down as he gets bigger in your mirror on those fresher tires.
I think it's the flames too, right? You remember how good Jeff Gordon was in the early 2000s with flames the front end of his car. I have a feeling there's got to be some sort of spirit of that in there. And oh, by the way, let's not forget that Jeff Gordon was your inaugural winner here. Kansas Speedway when they ran their first Cup race at the end of September in 2001. So maybe an inspired choice in that sense from Kane Cook, who is going to have to hold off Malik Ray here, who's also on the same strategy. Ray actually has fresher tires by about a lap and was about a 10th quicker than Kane Cook that last time by. So those two may end up being the ones to fight for the lead and maybe for the victory as well, as Cozy continues to lead, but for how much longer is the question.
That is the question indeed. And right now, Michael Cozy Jr., he's already on worse tires than Kane Cook and Malik Ray back here, but potentially exacerbating that difference just a little bit by staying all the way up on the high side. In turns 1 and 2, opts to take a little more of the middle, slides the car up in the middle of the corner to the high side, but still definitely the longer way around the track compared to Kane Cook and Malik Ray, who are both preferring that lower groove, and just a little bit for Kane Cook, that middle groove as well.
Just a little, not a lot, but just a little. How that pans out, how that evolves over the course of these final, call it 50, 40, 45-ish, 46-ish laps. There we go. I knew I could find the number somewhere. But how that evolves over the course of the final 46, 45 laps or so will be intriguing to watch. I think it's going to go a long way to determining who's going to end up with the victory, as Malik Ray is sort of fallen off the pace of Kane Cook just a bit. Cook ran a 32.8 to Malik's 33.0 that last time by. Cozy now here in leading position for maybe not too much longer. Here comes Kane Cook to the inside. He will think about and then go in the middle to try and get alongside Michael Cozy Jr., which he will do on the exit of turn 2. And by the time they get to turn 3, Kane Cook should have everything cleared up to where he may well just assert himself into P1. Cozy's going to fight back on the inside and make sure it's not a done deal just yet. But as they come out of turn 4, Kane Cook back to the race lead and the kick of the tires 400K.
And a big part of that from Michael Cozy Jr., aside from this obvious tire wear that we got going on, once again, it was about a 0.3 difference there from Michael Cozy Jr. and Kane Cook. But Cozy really got hung up behind Andy Margot, lap traffic there, and Kane Cook got around him flawlessly, and that really has set all of this into motion now, where Michael Cozy Jr. is going to be fighting for dear life compared to Malik Ray and Kane Cook. They're fresher tires now, as Malik Ray is going to clear Michael Cozy Jr. for that second spot. And now Cozy's going to have a lot of breathing room back to Michael P. Frisch, who is just now coming out of turn 4.
Remember, we said that if you're splitting this in half, which I think is going to be the ideal strategy if we go green the rest of the way, then your pit stop is going to come somewhere in the ballpark of the 30s. So if you're Cozy and company, you probably have somewhere in the range of about 10 to 15 laps before you can come into where you can split this final run.
Yeah, definitely keeping an eye on Cozy and Wyatt Tinsley as well whenever they decide to dip onto the pit lane, because whatever that difference is, that's going to be the key factor in how the standings will look come the finish of this race. I mean, Kane Cook, Malik Ray absolutely had to hunt down Cozy and Tinsley there. As we see now, I believe we have our first taker on pit road.
We do. It's Art Reimer, who is in for what should be his final stop of the race from the 25th position. Also of note, Brian Mercurio and Dylan Basin fighting for track position. Here's a good battle to this group, and Logan Helton in the mix too as they come out of 4. Mercurio in 6th. Basin trying to take it away. Helton trying to figure out who's going to win this battle and who he should go with to try and gain some track position somewhere.
And you see 3 wide there from Logan Helton in between Brian Mercurio, Dylan Basin. On board with Dylan Basin right there. I mean, you see just how much he's handling that race car right now. All over the wheel. Oh, we got a spinner on the backstretch, looks like.
Tyler Lonan in trouble. Couldn't quite tell what happened to him on the back straightaway, but I suspect, just getting a chance to look at it myself, same thing, got loose off of turn 2 and just overcorrected, spun himself out. There was already damage on the right front of his machine, so he will roll on the apron and try and regroup himself and hang on to it there. He just about lost it in the middle of the front straightaway, but as it stands, it's still Kane Cook, Malik Ray, Michael Cozy Jr., then Frisch, then King, Basin, Mercurio, Helton, and Tinsley, and Kevin McAdams, your top 10.
And that car absolutely a handful for Tyler Landon right now. And he's already had a couple incidents. It was 2 runs ago towards the end of it. He was slapping the wall over and over. A lot of damage to that 64. Maybe kind of a culmination of all that here. Tough run for him tonight, sitting P27. Definitely not what he needed. Looking back to the battle, now we have Kevin King, Michael P. Frisch, and Dylan Basin all once again under a blanket. That's Brian Mercurio behind him, and I believe Spencer Ray as well.
Look at Dylan Basin working the high line to get around Michael P. Frisch and maybe, just maybe, have a shot at Kevin King. This is some really, really solid stuff, and everybody here is largely on the same strategy, save for Michael Frisch, who came in 8 laps earlier than a lot of these drivers that are on the lead lap around him. So that's why Frisch is sliding back. That's why you see Basin and King and company moving towards the front.
And big here, our first domino of this final pit stop has fallen. Wyatt Tinsley has now brought his number 20 machine down onto the pit lane. Smooth entry, smooth getting into the box, 4 tires and fuel. Logan Helton now dipping on as well. Wyatt Tinsley's off the pit lane, and now his charge for potentially a win here is underway as he will get off pit road cleanly. And as I said, Logan Helton on pit road as well, starting to see some of these short pitters now on their conquest for a win here tonight.
So the magic number for Tinsley, 37 laps. And for Helton as well, but we said that Tinsley was going to need to come down earlier than everybody else. That's his mark. It's not quite a straight split compared to the main strategy and where they came in. We'll see some of the leaders, I think, probably hang out for another 5-ish laps or so, but Tinsley, per his strategy, had to come down before everybody else, and has. So the question will be, how much does he gain, and what sort of buffer does he have to work with in order to maybe have a shot at winning the Kicking the Tires 400K?
Yeah, and I mean, Wyatt Tinsley, he's chosen a really early peak here in this run. I mean, he's going to be super fast here while these guys haven't pit, but once again, once these guys do kind of cycle through, he's going to be in that same position of kind of bleeding lap time. I really like where Cozy's sitting, where it's not it's not egregiously early, but it is a significant enough difference to where he'll have a few laps to kind of play around with, where he'll be around Wyatt Tinsley, and Malik Ray and Kane Cook will potentially still be trying to catch up with that 99. So really a big fan of what Cozy's been doing so far here tonight. We'll see how it plays out. 34 laps to go. We're getting right down to it.
Ryan Naraki and Alex Konelix also just came down pit road to make their final stops of the race, and now we'll get a good look at Kevin King and Brian Mercurio. And folks, we're about to hit that crossover point where the runs that these drivers are on are as long as the amount of laps we have left to race in our kicking the tires 400K. We're not quite at that crossover point just yet, but we're closing in on it very quickly. We'll see who hits it when the run and the number of laps left that we have up on the pylon are the same. We'll hit that spot in about 2 to 3 laps, and I would expect a significant amount of drivers to come down at that point. Matt Spalding has already brought his car in from the 15th position.
And you see Ryan Naraki there. We got a glimpse of it. Just went under the white line to pass some of these other lap cars, or not lap cars, excuse me, some of these cars on older tires. And that's the advantage we're seeing from these early pitters right now, guys like Wyatt Tinsley. Wyatt Tinsley just did a sub 32-second lap, and that time was in the 32.0s. Whereas you look back up at your leaders, and Michael Cozy Jr., for example, sitting P3, just did a 33.9. So I mean, it's almost a second difference right now, which is just absolutely huge on this racetrack. It's just come huge. 10 laps from now.
It's huge, but we've seen that fall off a good bit. We're already seeing some folks. Cozy is now coming down. Cozy is going to split his piece perfectly. He comes down. He had 32 laps on his tires, but on 31 laps to go. So Cozy's the one who mathematically is going to hit this right on the nose and split this into 2 even runs to come towards the end. I would say he might be the one with the optimal strategy. I think you'd want to split these and make them even. That's what I would be shooting for if I were driving. The question is whether or not he has the track position to make this work and get him to victory lane. He'll be close. Just see how close. Nate Stewart's in as well. He's actually going to short pit compared to what he's been doing. Stewart's been one of the longer running ones, so he's going to bring it in early to try and finish off this race and maybe gain some track position by short pitting that one.
And Cozy in and out cleanly. And as you said, mathematically, he's the one that has kind of just hit this on the nose. But I mean, this is not factoring in any unpredictable FTF things that could occur here over these next few laps. I mean, 30 to go. I mean, there's no guarantee that this thing does go green all the way. So we'll see how that plays out. But right now, if you're Michael Cozy Jr., you got to be happy with what you have going so far.
Well, there's the FTF funniness that could happen. You could see a yellow flag pop up if someone gets into trouble. There's also the flip side of this, which is that the leaders who are staying out on the racetrack now, who aren't going to split this in the middle, are going to be able to push harder. As you see Brandon Hawken come down pit road for service, but the leaders that have yet to come down are going to be able to push harder in the final stint of this race in order to make it. As here comes Kane Cook down pit road for the race lead, and Malik Ray is going to stay out. So Cook will come in 33 laps on his tires when he came in, 29 laps to go. He'll be able to push a little bit harder than some of the folks who come down earlier. And you would imagine that Malik Ray may well respond in the very next lap or so and come down pit road for what should be his last stop of the race.
And what that tells me is that Malik Ray is really confident in his ability to chase down Kane Cook, some of these other guys, as we get deeper into the run. And you see now, will he opt to come down pit lane? I don't believe he will. I think he'll stay out one or two more laps. Big move here from Malik Ray.
I couldn't tell if he was trying to come down there. I don't know if he bled at any time. That's something I think we're going to need to watch for, but it didn't necessarily look like the cleanest of exits out of turn 4 from Malik Ray, who was certainly sideways and drifting a little bit Blake Reynolds style on corner exit. We'll keep an eye on him as they come down the back straightaway, and as Malik Ray enters turn 3, now to the middle of 3 over into turn 4. Is he going to come down this time? No. So Malik Ray is going to stay out here and try and stretch this a bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really aggressive strategy from Malik Ray, which, with Malik Ray, we come to expect aggressive strategies, but not so sure that this is going to pay off. I mean, the difference right now is almost 2 seconds from these guys that have pitted. Michael Cozy Jr., who's crawled his way all the way back up to 5th, albeit a lap down. is running 2 seconds faster than Malik Ray. So not sure if the trade-off is really worth it at this point. You might want to just bite the bullet and come on down to the pit lane.
Unless you're just going to try and stretch this the rest of the way and maybe make up some track position or get the win that way. Malik Ray, Kevin McAdams, and Matt Danson are the three drivers, along with Evan Rice and Matthews Wack, who I think may have had some speeding penalties, down in 20th after running in about 10th for most of this race. But that handful of drivers, well, there goes McAdams and Danson to completely just shoot that in the foot. So now it is really on Malik Ray to see whether or not he's going to stay out and run this all the way to the end, or whether or not he's going to come down pit road at some point soon.
Well, the big number to watch right now is that interval coming to 25 laps to go. Looking at Michael Cozy Jr., he's already gained about a second in the time that they've gotten around Malik Ray. So if he does opt to maybe stay out at the rate they're at, not sure that's going to be enough time for Malik Ray to stave off these guys in Michael Cozy Jr. and Logan Helton, who are just absolutely hard charging.
Here comes Kane Cook around Wyatt Tinsley, and you're going to see Cook blitz past Malik Ray here on the fresh tires. So Cook is going to have to make up a whole lap on Malik Ray in the final 24 in order to have a shot at winning this race. And how well have you managed your tires if you're Malik Ray? The difference in lap times, it was a 32.1 to a 34.0, so almost 2 seconds, like you said, Caleb, coming off of pit road with fresh rubber for Kane Cook. But Kane Cook has to make up an entire lap on Malik Ray in order to get the lead back and find himself in victory lane at his home track in the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series Kicking the Tires 400 Cup.
Wyatt Tinsley hit the transition, I believe, there, got really wobbly in front of Malik Ray right there. And yeah, you know, at this point, with how far out you are on this run, I believe you almost have to just be committed to trying to hold these guys off for 22 more laps. At about 2 seconds a lap, it's just not looking good for Malik Ray right now. But I mean, you know, Malik Ray has already hit that point of fall off, whereas Cozy and Logan Helton right now are really just driving those cars as hard as they can. And actually, Malik Ray going to dip down onto the pit lane this lap.
So now Malik Ray is going to come in for service, and now he makes his pit stop, and this is a solid 7 laps after Kane Cook came down pit road. So now we're going to see what the gap is between Ray and Cook once they cycle out, and we'll also keep an eye on the gap between Cozy and Cook, which stands at about 2 seconds.
And now you see Michael Cozy Jr. going to inherit the lead as Malik Ray is still down on pit road. So short-term loss will, you know, it remains to be seen how that will pay off for Malik Ray in the long run. But now Michael Cozy Jr. inherits the lead. All eyes now on that number 99, and Kane Cook slowly but surely chasing down the number 99 machine of Michael Cozy Jr., similar to what we saw last run now.
So what will Kane Cook be able to do here in the final 20 laps of this race? He was faster than Michael Cozy by half a second that last time by. It's now 1.6 seconds between Cozy, who would lock himself into the next round of the playoffs with a win, and Cook, who would shake it up for everybody and force everyone to be racing at Bristol for one ability to lock themselves in. Everybody else would then get their way into the round of 12 on points.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be something? I mean, with Michael Guest winning last week and Kane Cook potentially trying to get a win this week, that would be the ultimate wild card going into Bristol, but we'll see how it plays out. Michael Cozy Jr. still having the lead for right now. I believe Logan Helton starting to fall off lap time just a bit. Not at the point where it's bleeding, but you can see that he is starting to visibly struggle around this racetrack.
A lot of people fighting, a lot of people in trouble here, a lot of people pushing to try and find some sort of pace, some sort of speed. Cozy now only in front by 0.7 of a second. Kane Cook is charging as you get a good look at Logan Helton, who sits in third. He's about 5 seconds back of Michael Cozy Jr., about 4 seconds back of Kane Cook, who continues to make the run on Michael Cozy for the race lead.
And all eyes on this battle still. Kane Cook reeling in that 99 machine. Cozy, once again, he's not running as high as he was last run. He's still trying to opt. I think he's just trying to take away that lane from Kane Cook where he's seen Kane Cook be most comfortable at. Now trying to take the air off the nose of that machine.
Kane Cook to the outside, looking for the race lead on Michael Cozy Jr. He is there on the Altus Esports driver. Where does Cook go now, and how do they use that machine of Ryan Araki as a pit? Cook is just going to run the middle of the racetrack, about maybe 3/4 of a car up on Cozy. We'll try and diamond the exit of turn 4 to hit down to the inside and maybe get to the apron to get underneath Cozy as they come to turn 1. Here comes Kane Cook to the inside for the race lead with 16 laps to go at Kansas. He will push in the middle of 1 and 2, slide up in front of Cozy. Kane Cook back to the point late in the kick in the tires 400K.
And you really see how much respect between these two drivers there is. Michael Cozy Jr. giving Kane Cook plenty of room to operate. Many drivers who would not say the same at this point in the race with 16 laps to go, fighting for the lead. But now, you know, looking, it's all about lap times now. I mean, I feel like kind of obligated to look back at Malik Ray as we have a car off pace. That's the number 88, I believe. That is Marcus Ciasco.
Matt Spalding, I believe, actually, as we get a good look at the 88 machine. Or Ciasco indeed, actually. Yep, this is 78 instead of the 88. So 88. So I was right. It was Matt Spalding all along, and our producer in my ear telling me silly nonsenses. I see how it is, the trickery. Is yes, indeed, that is Matt Spalding there, who not having a good night. This is not the kind of night you want if you're a playoff driver. He'll come down pit road for service to just try and get a little bit of grip at the end of this race, try and save himself, but he's in 16th. He's going to slide back a little bit further.
Yeah, that's Marcus Ciasco in the 088, not the 88 of Matt Spalding, who is on track still. Michael Cozy Jr., looking at him going through turns number 3 and 4. And right now, you feel a little obligated to look at Malik Ray, who was the latest car to pit in the number 700. Right now, he's running 32.5s just about. And then looking back at our leader of Kane Cook, who he was pretty much conjoined at the hip with last time. And Kane Cook is, you know, right in that ballpark of 33.0. So it's all about that fall off. And if we think Malik Ray played that right, you know, looking right now, he's crawling his way up through the field, just an 11-second gap. Not sure he's going to be able to make up that much lap time. And if that's the case, then Kane Cook has a sizable gap to Michael Cozy Jr., who is on older tires than that 013 is. So Kane Cook really in just prime position right now.
Begs the question why Malik Ray didn't answer immediately and come down next time by, just to preserve that difference in tires and not give up so much time on the old tires. That's the problem here. He certainly has the tire to try and gain on Malik, or rather Kane Cook. The problem is that he was only 3 or 4 tenths faster than Kane Cook that last time by, and it's, like you said, now somewhere in the ballpark of a 10-11 second gap.
And I mean, just not sure, just not sure what was going on there. I mean, Malik Ray, you know what, it almost felt like he was committed to just staying out with his lap. You know, it was, I believe, a 25-second difference, but he was just bleeding lap time at the end there. So that 7-lap difference is really going to be the key factor. I just don't think it's going to be enough for that 700 machine in terms of pit strategy. But that's how pit strategy goes a lot of the time, is it's just making gambles and seeing if the house is in your favor, which tonight at Kansas, I don't believe it was.
Don't think it was in the slightest. And funny that you mentioned that, because there is the casino right there outside of turn 2. Passing thought there. So as Kane Cook continues to roll, this is Kevin King and Logan Helton, who are fighting for 5th and 6th on the racetrack, as we are within 10 laps to go of the finish of the Kick in the Tires 400K here at the virtual Kansas Speedway.
Yeah, and you know I couldn't let your wordplay go unanswered. I had to sneak one of my own in there.
Touche, senor. Touche. As Kane Cook all by himself in his own zip code, stretching it out on Michael Cozy Jr. Dylan Basin and Brian Mercurio, though, may have a good battle going for third and fourth in pretty short order.
And, you know, if Michael Cozy Jr. can't come out of here with a win tonight, at least he's got in his favor that he is the highest running playoff driver and will accrue the most points. And, you know, seeing as he was the first driver out of the cutoff, coming out of Darlington, just an absolutely great rebound from Darlington for the driver of the number 99. Just great momentum to carry in with him to Bristol, if nothing else.
Indeed, indeed. Really, really good momentum, although you'd want the win, I think, if you're Michael Cozy Jr., given how close you are to the bubble. Yes, the points are going to help. Yes, it's going to help pull him up. And yes, he's going to gain a lot on Chris Wetz, who has not had a good night at all this evening. But you'd rather be breathing easy and sitting with a win in your pocket, not having to worry about Bristol. I think there's still going to be work to be done for Michael Cozy at this rate, unless something happens to Kane Cook in these final 7 laps or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a win here is so huge for any playoff driver. I mean, you get to completely throw Bristol out of your calendar. It's a non-factor at that point, and you can start planning ahead to the next round, whatever that may entail, whether it be some extra practice laps that you have to otherwise commit to a track as challenging as Bristol, especially on the iRacing service. I mean, Bristol is just absolutely a grueling racetrack.
It's tough. It's a very, very tough place to get around, a very tricky place, especially when you're moving at that sort of sense of speed more than anything else. As we go back to the battle of Logan Helton and Michael P. Frisch and company, and I think Malik Ray is now just in front of them. Ray has managed to clear them, but again, that gap to Kane Cook is sat still at about 10 seconds for the last maybe 4 or 5 laps or so. So the pit strategy just has not played out in Malik Ray's favor tonight.
No, absolutely not. And 10 seconds with coming to 5 laps to go, just what could have been for Malik Ray tonight had he pit a little earlier, but will not play out that way. Looking back at the battle now between, this is Logan Helton and Michael P. Frisch, and right now they are fighting for the 4th highest playoff spot. Every point for these two matters, and you can see it right here with how hard Logan Helton is fighting on the outside, albeit with those older tires. He's just fighting the racetrack a little bit more. Big wiggle off turn 4. He'll keep the car pointed straight, but will fall behind Michael P. Frisch now and fall in line to the 8th position.
So Frisch to 7th, Helton to 8th, and Brandon Hawken, the next man in line, if he can make things happen. But everybody here in pretty good shape. Frisch and Hawken in particular with plenty of points in the bag. So yes, still work to be done at Bristol if you want to, but not really much to worry about. I think if you're either one of those two, we will almost certainly see them in the final, or rather in the next round of 12. As Helton, I think, caught the fence there just a little bit. 3 laps to go though for Kane Cook, coming at 2 to go. So he wants to down the back straightaway.
Contact between Malik Ray and Ryan Araki there. Ryan Araki in P20, 1 lap down, but Malik Ray did not give him any room, and they both made contact with the outside wall. Pretty sizable contact at that. Ryan Araki and Malik Ray, however, will continue going, and it looks like we'll be able to get through this, coming now to 2 laps to go for Kane Cook, our leader.
Kane Cook is in his own zip code, and there is absolutely nothing he has to worry about. No lap traffic, no anything for this final lap and a half of the Kick the Tires 400K. He's going to have the chance to cruise to victory if he wants.
Absolutely, and almost a 3-second gap now for Kane Cook, the driver of the 013. He's had everything go right tonight. White flag now for Kane Cook, coming through turns 1 and 2 for the final time in that 013 machine. Played his cards right, if you will, here at Kansas, coming down the backstretch for the final time. Doesn't look like Michael Cozy Jr. is going to have anything for him.
All about Kane Cook this evening in the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series at Kansas Speedway. And the man from just over the border in Missouri will come to his home track and win the Kick in the Tires 400K at the virtual Kansas Speedway with an exclamation point, a thumping run. Once we got on green flag pit strategy, no one had the long run pace of Kane Cook. No one could match him, and maybe not a surprise that the man closest to home brings it home to victory lane as well.
Absolutely, and you'll see everybody else get across the line here. What a nice, refreshing breather to watch just a fuel strategy race, just one of those old school, how is the strategy going to play out? And it played out for sure in Kane Cook's favor tonight. He was able to work his way around lots of fast cars, namely Michael Cozy Jr. and Malik Ray, to get in victory lane here tonight at Kansas.
Kane Cook going to come down in front of all of the adoring fans and burn it down on the front straightaway here at Kansas Speedway. Celebrate his victory in the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series and give us a few donuts and a few burnouts as well to party on as he wins the Kick in the Tires 400K at Kansas Speedway. And as he burns it down, we'll take an opportunity in just a moment to give you the full field rundown and tell you where your favorite driver finished tonight. And did it in style, too. He was clear of Michael Cozy Jr. by 3.416 seconds as Cozy Jr. finished second. Dylan Basin came home in third. We'll talk to those three drivers momentarily. Brian Mercurio finished in the fourth spot. Fifth this evening went to Kevin King. Malik Ray with a pit strategy didn't work out for him. He came home sixth. Michael P. Frisch runs in the seventh spot when it's all said and done. Logan Helton comes home in the eighth spot. Ninth belongs to the 99 of Brandon Hawkin. And Blake Reynolds completes the top 10.
We'll take a look on back. Kevin McAdams and Nathan Rabideau both had really strong nights. Matt Danson and Wyatt Tinsley, whose pit strategy didn't quite work out for him. Nate Stewart, Jonathan Oates in P15 and 16 respectively. In 17th is Matt Spalding, Cosmin Ionescu in P number 18. In 19th is Jake Poulin. And then coming home and rounding out the top 20 is Ryan Naraki, one lap down.
21st this evening was Ryan Pandesio. 22nd on the pylon was Evan Rice. Alex Kalanick finishes the 23rd position, and Matthews Wack brings it home at the 24th spot. Art Reimer finishes 25th this evening. 26th went to Scotty Smith. Tyler Lannon finished at the 27th spot. 28th went to Andy Margo. Dylan Dreiling finishes at 29th. Spencer Ray completed the top 30.
Looking back to 31st, Chris Wetz, who we saw in that accident there. Tough night for him. Marcus Siasco, who we also saw in an accident, comes home P32. Tyler Stillwell in 33rd. Tyler Gary in 34th. Robert Dorman comes home 35th. Josh Parker in the 36th position tonight after starting 7th. Tough night for him. Phil McCandless, who we saw in that wreck early on, comes home 37th. David Cabrera in 38th. Clint Roberts in 39th. Rounding out your top 40 is Devin Mistak.
Final three cars, Justin Melillo, Brent Funkari, and Jordan Worth in the mix as we now turn our attention to our race winner. We'll see if we can't get Kane Cook in for a few words and see what he has to say about his victory here at the virtual Kansas Speedway and winning in FTF Cup Series competition. Kane Cook, that final run and those final two runs, I think, really were all about maintaining speed over the course of long green flag runs. So how did you do that from your perspective? And how did you find the speed, especially when we were 20, 30 laps in to a green flag run on a set of old tires?
It all starts with the line I run. Me and Michael Guest, too. He wasn't racing tonight. I believe he won last week, if I remember right, and dude's an absolute monster. I just don't know why no one else ever tries to learn the line that we run. Every year we use it. Every year it's effective, no matter the car, and it just straight up dominates. So I don't know what everybody else is doing, not even trying it. for 6 years, but it is what it is. Malik's also a beast. Jesus Christ, that was stressful, having him parking a couple tenths behind me the whole time. He let me off the hook with the pit strategy that he went with. It was pretty stressful, to be honest. So thanks to him for letting me off the hook on that last run. But it was really awkward. Cozy was short pitting with the fuel tank. We couldn't make it that full run. So it was just a really awkward trying to balance, making sure Cozy didn't outpit us and that Malik didn't short pit me or get in front of me.
What's it mean for you to win as a Missouri native to come to Kansas and win at your home track? It's a big deal, and especially in this series, which we know is one of the best on the other side of iRacing. It's stiff competition, but does winning at home make it a little bit more special than usual?
Well, I'm currently in Montana working, so I'm pretty homesick. So yeah, it is very nice. It's even nicer just to get a great race. I mean, one caution, 167 laps. You got a great field full of some really amazing competition, Coke drivers, stuff like that. So very rare that you're able to even get a race that goes this well, then have it at your hometown. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull one out in Kansas at Coke, so this is probably the biggest race I can get besides that, unless I do Road to Pro or Pro again and get lucky and have a Kansas race. So, yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty fun race. I'm pretty happy with everything.
Kane Cook with a dominant performance to bring it home P1 tonight in the Kicking the Tires 400K. From Kane, we slide over to Michael Cozy Jr., our highest finishing playoff driver, and he is with Caleb Hoffman.
There's Michael Cozy Jr. finishing P2 tonight, highest finishing playoff driver. What does that mean to you going into the cutoff round at Bristol, especially with the run you had last week at Darlington?
Oh, man, I had no idea the next race was Bristol, so I feel a lot better. Yeah, I stink at this car. I hate the car, as a matter of fact. I think it's a stupid car. And I especially am not a big mile and a half guy. At Kansas, I thought this was going to be a lot different than what it was. I don't know even why I qualified pole, as a matter of fact, but I really appreciate everybody for keeping it as green as much as what we did. I can't say I would have stayed up front as much if we would have had more cautions, but it was fun to learn and get some runs going. I wish I had a little more long run pace. Kane was doing some crazy stuff there in the middle. I was trying to figure it out, but I just couldn't get there. I couldn't figure it out. But it was, looking at the playoffs, I got a stage win, and I finished third in the other stage, and then P2 overall. So I'm pretty darn happy. I don't know how that's gonna work, but I know the points format's pretty crazy in this year league. So I'm hoping that's gonna shoot me up there pretty good. So then I'm gonna be cruising come Bristol, because Lord knows how that's going to go. But I'm very excited, very happy. Matt had a great run. We have both qualified pretty good. And just happy overall. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talk us through that last cycle of pit stops for you. Weren't sure if it was going to go green all the way, and it ends up going green all the way. How were you feeling when you were coming in with 32 laps to go? Just how that would end up playing out for you?
Not good. I knew I wasn't going to lose. I knew I was on a losing strategy just because I had gotten behind on the tires, and I didn't really realize until like the fall off. There's a lot of fall offs. So anytime you basically, with short pit, you come in early, you get an advantage, but I'd get cooked every time late run. So I was just like, is FTF. I was just assuming we'd probably get a caution at some point. I was hoping I would catch said caution, and then we'd kind of like cycle even on tires, and then we kind of go on our merry way. But that never really happened. So then I just kept on getting probably more and more behind on the tires. So at that point, it was just like, well, whatever happens, happens. But I knew I probably wasn't going to win. But P2, hey, we'll take it. Shout out to the sponsors, Logitech, VRS, and all them bad boys on there, and we'll take it on to Bristol, I suppose.
Absolutely. A strong P2 run for you tonight. Congratulations. Hopefully we end up talking to you next week after Bristol.
I hope so, and not in the care center.
Yeah, have a good night, Cozy.
Thank you.
We slide from Michael Cozy to Dylan Bass in P3. And Dylan, you were the one that had the great battles with a whole host of drivers in the top 10. Brian Mercurio, Kevin King, Wyatt Tinsley, Michael Frisch, Malik Ray. From your perspective behind the wheel, what was that like to have to fight them, especially in the second half of this race?
That was stressful, man. The past few weeks I've been struggling with saving the right rear in this car at multiple tracks. I don't know what it is with me in the next gen. If it's a B car, I can do good, but if it's a next gen, I can't do anything. So I was trying to keep in mind of my right rear this race. Car was really loose, unless you were in traffic, then it would plow tight. But instead of trying to match their pace, I go a little bit slower beginning of the run and then try to catch back up to them, and it worked. This car is mostly about backing up as much as you can without losing too much time, and then coming back in the long run. So, it was fun to race him for once. Usually, I'm kind of stuck back in like P10. Racing those guys gives you a big confidence booster and stuff, and you learn a lot from them. So I'm glad I was around in the whole race and got to learn from them and had some fun.
Big here to get that P3, get the podium finish. What kind of momentum does this build for you going forward in the season?
Pretty good momentum, man. I mean, Daytona, we got P8. I know Richmond a few weeks back, we got P2, P3 here, and then P4 at Darlington. So any kind of track we go to these past 2 weeks, I've been running really well, consistent. I'd like to get a win, but I'm fine with finishing second or third every week. It's a big progress in the beginning of the season where I was either finishing bad or getting wrecked out. So I'm good momentum. Hopefully next week at Bristol, we can get ourselves a win.
We'll keep our eyes peeled to see whether or not he can do just that. Dylan Basin comes home P3 this evening in the kick of the tires 400K at Kansas. And we now turn our attention, Caleb Hoffman, to the point standings before we go. And how about the moves that Michael Cozy Jr. made?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at this new grid now after Kansas, Michael Cozy Jr. has moved his way all the way up from the cutoff 8 spots. He's now sitting P5. Our 4 outside looking in now, Cosmin Ionescu, Jonathan Oates, Chris Wetz, and Matthew Zwack, who have all either been involved in crashes or just had lackluster performances here tonight. So going into Bristol, those guys absolutely have to be stressing, especially with how chaotic Bristol's going to be. And I mean, who would have expected Kansas, what feels like one of the most insane intermediates in terms of, we see the craziest accidents, the craziest racing, and then we come here and we get one caution on lap 13, and then the rest of the way is just a strategy race. Really refreshing, but can't say I really expected it. And now, looking forward to Bristol, kind of that same energy that you had coming in here with just how chaotic is that going to be as a cutoff race. So a lot of these playoff drivers they got to be stressing at this point.
Let's think about that. That Cozy came into this race tied for 13th in points. And now, as I look at it, he's up 8 spots in the point standings to 5th. And to that cutoff line, he gained somewhere in the ballpark of, I believe, 80 points on Cosmin, who now sits in that cutoff spot. Also worth noting that there is a 4-point difference between Cosmin and Logan Helton. Helton's got the final cutoff spot going to Bristol. Cosmin wants it, but it's Cosmin, Jonathan Oates, Chris Wetz, and Matthew Zwack that find themselves on the outside looking in. And in the case of Zwack and Wetz in particular, and I think you can make a strong argument for Oates as well, if you want to find yourself in the round of 12, it almost is a must-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it does feel like a must win. And the interesting dynamic here is that basically nobody's locked in. I mean, Brian Mercurio is in a situation where he's locked in, but Kevin King on back, I mean, all of those spots are up for grabs. So it's a situation where you're going to have to run well. And not only run well, you're going to have to be competitive at a track that is so notorious for throwing wrenches your way. So just something about this schedule that is so much fun, that we get to go to Bristol next week as a playoff cutoff race. So we'll see the calamity that ensues from that, but absolutely exciting next week, and even looking forward into the round of 12.
Bristol, a place where you may have to throw wrenches at your car to try and fix it, and sometimes the wrenches get thrown at you, and sometimes the track is throwing them, and sometimes it could be people throwing them. You never quite know how things pan out in Thunder Valley, but you'll have to pay attention and keep your eyes peeled and be ready for that 1 week from tonight. That's the biggest thing you need to note. It's the final race in the round of 16, and it's the biggest race in the round of 16 because we will send 4 drivers home from the playoffs. And if you want to keep your eyes peeled, you're going to have to wait actually until Sunday at 8:30 p.m. on the 18th of September here on FTF.GG on twitch.tv/FTF_GG. That's when we head to Bristol for the Kick in the Tires round of 16 finale, 300 here for the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series. We'll figure out who advances, who is done trying to chase the title, and how things will pan out as we prepare for the round of 12. For our producer this evening, Zach Johnson, and from my colleague in the booth, Caleb Hoffman, I am James Pine. Thank you so much for tuning in to FTF.GG's coverage of the Kick in the Tires 400K at the virtual Kansas Speedway for the Barr Visuals FTF Cup Series. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday night from Thunder Valley to figure out who advances into the round of